2025 was one of the best years for comics in recent memories. So much so that I had more trouble this year coming up with a top 10 comics of the year list than I've had any other year that I've made such a list, even the years where I haven't made videos on them. After much deliberation, these are my 10 favorite comics of 2025. We're going to start the list off with a book I did not expect to like, much less be one of my top 10 books of the year. And that is going to be Exquisite Corpses. This is coming out from Image Comics from the creative team of James Tynion IV and Michael Walsh, and tells the tale of a small town in Maine that on Halloween night is beset by the 1% of the 1% of the 1% that secretly rule the world and decide who is actually going to be in charge for the next several years by hiring killers that come out and basically proxy for them and decimate each other until there is one last one standing. It's gruesome, it's gory, it's over the top, and man, is this a perfect comic. There's a tournament bracket going on at the end of every issue. They have a kind of breakdown of who's going. The characters are so over the top and perfectly designed that it just works so well. It feels like a character select game in a video game. They're making a card game from it, so it makes sense that they would go there. And all the while, we go back and forth from these just brutal moments of the killers going at it to the people of the town who don't understand what's happening and are just trying to survive this night, and then the 1%ers back in the command center watching this go all out. This could have been, and what I expected it to be, just a really stereotypical, bloodbath, gory comic, and what it is just so much more in gory, bloody fun. James Tynion, of course, is the author of so many comics that are going out right now. Michael Walsh, if you don't recognize the name, he was the creative mind behind Image's previously the Silver Coin horror anthology series. Really love to see that he is going out and getting it. Currently, the series is just about wrapped up. We've got I think issue 9 just came out. I can't wait for this to become a hardcover. But for right now, this is one of my favorite miniseries at the moment. Coming in at our number 9 spot was a book I really expected to like, but I didn't expect this much. And that is going to be We're Taking Everyone Down With Us. This is a 6-issue miniseries that's written by Matthew Rosenberg and drawn by Stefano Landini, of course, with work from everybody else going in, including my guy Hassan on letters. This is going to tell a spy story, but a spy story not from the perspective that you would expect. We follow Annalise, who's the daughter of what we find out is one of the world's foremost mad scientists and typical Bond villain types. But we see it from her eyes. Early on, she's she's secluded on this island with him after he's basically more or less retired. And she's being raised by these group of robots from a very distant father figure whose work is mysterious, and she doesn't really understand. After an untimely fisherman ends up on the island, for the first time, their location is made known to the rest of the world, and what we get is a thrilling spy story of the spy being the antagonist, the James Bond character, looking for these characters while she runs away. And she ends up having to navigate this world that she is unaccustomed to with only a robot synthesis as a companion for her. It's really, really interesting. Of course, it's Matthew Rosenberg, so the dialogue is going to be really clever and fast, and everything else just kinds of fits. One of the things that I love about this is a lot of Matthew Rosenberg's tropes, like the many-paneled dialogues of just the heads that you go and see there, something like a crazy 9x9 grid. He incorporates in really clever ways. So we have one of my favorite scenes from issue 5 where Annalise is talking to another character over a game of chess. And we get that sort of classic dialogue box that's going there, but it's done over a chessboard where the pieces are actually moving to coordinate the movement of the dialogue. I think this is probably Matthew Rosenberg's best book since Four Kids Walk Into a Bank, which is one of my absolute favorite books of all time. I was so sad to see this one go. It's wrapped up in 6 issues, but it did say that the James Bond character of Rook is going to be returning in a future miniseries. It tells a complete story, but sets things up so well for the next one, where I bet we're going to see our ride-along character of Annalise, but maybe in a different role going forward. This is one that is not to be missed. Coming in at our number 8 spot, we have one of my most anticipated books of 2025, and that is going to be Mouse Guard: Dawn of the Black Axe. This is going to be our first real entry back into the world of Mouse Guard outside of sort of little stories here and there since really the book 3, The Black Axe. Unlike that, this is going to be the first time that someone besides David Peterson has actually drawn the series. He's handed the illustration reins off to Gabriel Rodriguez, though David Peterson still does the coloring on this. I talked to him at HeroesCon, and he said, don't expect to see that going through. He probably did as much work doing the colors as if he had just drawn it himself. This is going to tell a prequel story to the regular Mouse Guard world. If anyone knows me, you know I'm a big Mouse Guard fan. I have a piece of original Mouse Guard art behind me in all of my videos. And so when I heard that we were going to get the first real Mouse Guard story in a while, I was hooked. This is going to tell a prequel story about the first holder of the Black Axe. If anyone's read the series, you know the importance of that particular artifact. I'm not going to go into it, but basically it's whoever holds the Black Axe is almost like a mouse superhero working in the shadows to go ahead and defend mousekind. What we see is our first holder go after 5 snake kingdoms, and there's 5 snakes that are really causing a threat to mousekind, each with their own territory. He takes it on himself to go out and take these out along with the help of a ghost stag. But what he finds along the way is that maybe systematically destroying these snakes isn't helping as much as he thought. And maybe these snakes that he only saw previously as a threat to mice are actually just trying to live their own lives, and he's kind of being a bad guy, going out and just coming out into their world to go ahead and do this. You get a little bit of politics behind with working some deals with some snakes. You get some, of course, great action sequences that are going there. And even though it's not David Peterson doing the art, Gabriel Rodriguez really still hits the style that you're used to. So it doesn't feel out of place with the art. Honestly, this book would have been placed a lot higher if not for the fact it's only a 3-issue miniseries, and I would have loved to have seen just a little bit more. The ending did feel a little bit abrupt, and I want more Mouse Guard, guys. I'm jealous. I'm selfish like that. When I talked to David Peterson, he did say we should expect to see some more series along these lines in the coming years. He wants to tell some more stories about Black Axe holders along the way, so it might be a little bit before we catch up with our classic Liam, Kenzie, and Saxon. But more Mouse Guard is always a good thing, and enough for number 8 on our list this year. Clocking in at our number 7 spot is going to be one of the books that was on my top 10 list from last year very high, and that is going to be The Power Fantasy. This is year 2 of the ongoing series coming from Kieran Gillen and Caspar Wingard, telling an alternate history about basically a Cold War, not among US and USSR, but among superpowered beings. This is the second year that we have this going on, and it takes the ever slightest tick down. This is going to be telling the story of the second Summer of Love, an incident that was alluded to in the first year of the comic, and this year we really get to see it play out. We get to see the interplay of more of our superpowered heavies that are going on and basically are this world's versions of nuclear weapons and the interplay between all of them, telling the story of an incident in the past where they all had to play an active role. While that's sort of being retold, we get to see the ramifications of the acts of year one in this and how those things move forward and the shifting dynamics. For the most part, this year was a slower paced story in the Now storyline. The second Summer of Love, there was a lot that was happening there up until we get to the conclusion, which was explosive to say the least. And from that, we actually get to see a revelation for a character that was super interesting and is going to be setting up, I think, a lot of the storyline that we see this upcoming year. But because of that slower pace coming out of the gates from what we had from year one, this did dip down on my list just a little bit. I will still say, this is still my favorite ongoing series at the moment. Every time this comes out, and it's not quite monthly, it is a little interspersed, this is typically the top of my to-read pile. I love this book. I can't wait for this book to go on for a long, long time. And if you haven't read it yet, I highly suggest picking up the first 2 trade paperbacks and getting caught up, because it is a wild ride that is well worth your time. Taking our number 6 spot on the year is the comic I would say is the most delightful of the year, and that is going to be The Seasons by Rick Remender and Paul Azzetta. This is going to tell the story of a group of sisters that are all named after a different season. So you've got winter, spring, summer, and fall. The book follows the youngest sister, Spring, in the town of New Gallia as she's trying to navigate her life as a postal worker, at least in the first issue. That first issue is one of the most perfect first issues I ever read. It's an oversized one where we start off with a little bit of a warning that's being placed in the form of a letter to the youngest sister. And what follows is her journey through the town to get this wayward letter. Basically, as she's trying to deliver her own mail, she realizes there's a letter for her that's then taken away by a wind. And the entire issue of that first one is her chasing after this letter through all the different locations and all the people that she meets along the way in her town of New Gallia. Through the entire thing, we get to see basically everything. It's such a clever way of giving us this introduction where it always feels natural, but it's very clearly Rick Remender unveiling the location that we're going to see and the characters that are going to be there and giving us an introduction to everyone. And in this delightful thing where we get her talking with her goldfish, yes, she has a goldfish that she talks to and hears coming back from her, who is one of just the most fun things ever. And at the end of it, she gets the letter and she realizes it's a warning that she needs to get out of her town because a sinister force is coming. At that same time, she sees a image of a coming carnival that's going to be there. And what we get is just one of the most delightful stories that also feels sinister. It feels threatening, and it's just so wonderful. Every time I read this, there's a sense of whimsy that I don't get from most comics. In the first issue, Rick Remender talked about his love of bande dessinée, some of those European comics that you're going to get, and he wears the influence on the sleeve. The fact that the town is called New Gallia is very clearly a reference to Asterix and Obelix. Gaul, of course, being the old name for France, and the location that comic takes place in. He refers to it in his mind as a mix of Hayao Miyazaki's work and Tintin, and I think that reads beautifully here. Through this, we get to see the different season sisters interplay with each other. We get to see a little bit of the expedition that their parents went on, and at no point is it not delightful. The sense of delight never overtakes the seriousness that we feel from it, the weight that everything happens. But all the time that you're doing that, there's a smile on your face, even if this is quote-unquote boundary-breaking horror. The Seasons is going to be the most delightful book that you read this year, and it's really hard to imagine you'll have more fun with a comic than this one. Ringing in our number 5 spot is a book that for much of the year I thought was going to be my number 1 book of the year, and that is going to be Spectrum. This is a book coming out from Mad Cave Studios, written by Rick Quinn and drawn by the unparalleled Dave Chisholm. This is a book that tells the story of the latest incarnation of Melody, who we see now as a young girl living on the streets, being chased by the force of Echo. And what we see is Melody is sort of a universal force that gets reincarnated every time that she dies as some new shaper of music and beauty in the world. And opposing her is the force of Echo, one who is looking to sort of unify the world and believe that there are too many sounds, too many forces going on, and we need to distill it down to just its core elements. We need to make the world quieter and more uniform. And we see this story going through many different years, genres of music, a fight that has taken place through generations, and ultimately leads to a showdown about what the most important parts of our modern day world are and what brings joy to this otherwise dismal world. This is one of the most beautiful books that came out on shelves this year. It's often been said that Dave Chisholm, who has previously done books like the Miles Davis biography, can draw music better than anybody else in comics right now. And I have a hard time disputing that particular notion. My quick pitch for this particular book is this is the greatest W. Maxwell Prince miniseries that has nothing to do with WMP that's out there. If anyone was a fan of his book Art Brut, I think this is very similar to a music take as to what Art Brut was doing. I got to catch up with both the writer and artist at Heroes Con this year, both delightful people, and just absolutely loved what they were doing. And this book was so beloved to me that I even bought an original page from it. If you have any question about whether or not this book looks great, that page was my single favorite page of the entire series, even without color. I think it's so evocative of what this book is trying to do. This book comes out with a deluxe hardcover that's going to be oversized at the end of this month. I already have it pre-ordered. I can't wait to re-experience this book. For some mind-bending, genre-twisting work that's going to be some of the most heavy stuff you're going to read, but also just really, really get you into it, you got to check out Spectrum. It's unlike anything else that's on the stands right now, and I can't wait to see what we get from the rest of these creators. Also, in this part, I have to shout out some of the other work that Dave Chisholm did last year. His work from Oni Press, Plague House, was my favorite horror book of last year, and High Strangeness that he did issue 1 for was a really cool and kind of creepy alien abduction story. Dave Chisholm has just been knocking out of the park for years. 2025 was no exception, and I can't wait to see what comes in 2026. At our number 4 spot, we have the pinnacle of books from a writer who really honestly could have had 3 different books show up on this list. And that is going to be Assorted Crisis Events. This is coming out from Image Comics, written by Dennis Camp, who longtime viewers of the channels know I adore. He wrote my 2023 Book of the Year, 20th Century Men, and drawn by Eric Zawadsky. This book is basically if they took the classic Metro City storyline, The Nearness of You, and turned that into a full anthology series. The premise of this particular book is that we see a world that is going through a crisis level event. Think Crisis on Infinite Earths. Basically any type of comic event that is resetting continuity. But we take the human stories that come from there and see how the everyday person deals with a reality that is continuing to rewrite itself. Every single issue takes on a different character and takes on different topics. And we get to see stories that are pertaining to our real world and touch on some very real issues, but told through this comic book perspective. This was a hard one for me to rank. because the issues where this one was really on and really hit for me, notably this issue number 6, which was maybe the single best issue I read of any comic this year, issue 2 and issue 3 were some of the best comics that were out there. There were other issues that didn't hit quite as well for me. But when this book is on, it is some of the best that the comics medium has to offer. And I'll take this issue 6 as an example of it. This particular book talks about a husband and wife who have started their life together, have this beautiful arrangement, and then the husband gets stricken with a reality warping condition that has him going through different ages of his life in real time. Time has become a little funky. We're not even talking unstuck from time a la Slaughterhouse 5. We're talking about someone who is rapidly changing ages and cognitive ability through the course of this. And really, it's an analog for having to deal with early onset dementia or any type of disease that sort of takes the person that you love away from you and how you have to deal with that. It's heartbreaking, and this was one of 2 comics that got me to cry real tears this year. This one gets a particular point for it because I read this one in a public setting and did everything I could to try and brush those tears away. But it was beautiful, it was heartbreaking. To a lesser writer, I think you could look at this as sort of taking some emotionally vulnerable topics like dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that. Things that I and many of you, I imagine, have a history with, and putting them out in there as a comic. And I think that you could look at some emotional manipulation there with a lesser writer. But I think Dennis Camp does it so well and touches on the things that truly diseases like that take from us and the toll that those around them have to deal with, that is so beautifully touching and also told in a way that fits the topic that only a comic book could do. In the issues where this hits, like I said, these are some of the best comics, not just of this year, but of the last decade. Unfortunately, not all of them hit for me, and so it's only taking the number 4 spots, but its peaks are so high that this is not one to be missed. Condemned to our number 3 spot is More Weight, a Salem story. This is written, drawn, and everything by cartoonist Ben Wiki, coming out from Top Shelf Comics. This is a comic that tells the story of the Salem witch trials across 3 different eras, and imparts how maybe some of the things that happened then are at play currently in our, at least the U.S. political system, if not across the world. What we see is first a view of what modern Salem, Massachusetts has done with the horrifying stories of people falsely put to death by turning it into a tourist trap, and how they've sort of modernized and that's become part of their identity, is the spooky town where witches were hanged, even if they weren't actually witches. We also see the story of 2 people from a earlier age, but after the actual witch trials, and those of Nathaniel Hawthorne speaking with Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, as they discuss the history of this region where Hawthorne had relations with, and sort of how that affects them now. And then, of course, we have the telling of the actual story of the town of Salem and how it's gone through, and how really the boredom of some local children led to an area of mass hysteria, and just this idea that everyone out there who had something to hide must be guilty of something, and how easy it is for us to denounce our neighbors. Ben Wiki is the cartoonist on this, does everything himself, and in what is really an art style that almost reminds me at times of Schoolhouse Rock, and something that should be sort of light and inviting, is able to capture such a grim story, and imparts almost sort of the ridiculousness of the nature. these children that are out there and feigning, oh, she pinches, oh, I feel these things upon me, can lead to the imprisonment and sometimes death of these people that have nothing to do with it. About how professing your innocence can be the worst thing that happens out there for you, and how maybe, just maybe, we should be actively looking for the truth instead of just listening to those voices who are loudest. It's a chilling story that was then horrifying and apt now, and is an absolute accomplishment of the graphic novel medium. This is one I think more people need to be picking up on, because truly this is one of the great graphic novels of the year, as evidenced by its spot as number 3. Raining down from the heavens at our number 2 spot is what I believe to be the seminal work of one of my favorite artists of the last few years, and that's Drome by Jesse Lonergan. This is a book I've been shouting out since it came out as often as I can, and is a very Jack Kirby-inspired story of the creation of a world, the corruption that happens within there, and the fight to reclaim it. It's again one of those stories that could only exist as a graphic novel because so much of the actual work in this book is done through the storytelling of the images. And one of the things that I think is most neat about this book is really the format of it itself. You can see right from this first cover that Jesse creates this grid system where he says, I'm going to tell this story across these particular panels. And sometimes they'll lead to a bigger image, as we see up here. Sometimes there'll be sub-images. But this is a big theme of the book. You can see from the end sheets, it's there. And he's really doing everything he can. You open it up, and it continues through there. And he does this very intentionally at the beginning to sort of teach you the rules of reading this particular graphic novel so that he can go out and break them with some really, really clever sequences that are told through the breaking of the format that he himself created. Again, this is so Kirby-inspired. You have the battle between these two cosmic forces in the creation of the world and their particular champions. And we see through the storytelling that we have of just everything that happens there. Those that want to preserve the natural world, those that want to not just destroy that, but bend it to their will. We have my favorite fight scene of, I don't know how long, but just, it's one that anytime I've ever talked about this book, that's exactly where I go. When I was at Heroes Con, one of the big things that I was excited about was the fact that Jesse was going to be there. Drome had not released at that point, so he said, you can't buy a copy, but I will have one copy there that you can go ahead and read. And on Sunday, I went to his table. He was not there, but his copy of Drome was, and I got to read it. I got about halfway through. He showed up while I was doing it, and there was this kind of uncomfortable period where he was just sort of standing and watching me quietly read his graphic novel. I was so engrossed, I was not about to stop. At that moment, I knew this was a book I needed in my collection, and I needed to finish post-haste. It's a book I've read so far 3 times, I think, in full since it's come out, and I don't anticipate that stopping anytime soon. It is a triumph of graphic novelist storytelling. It shows exactly why this medium is so special. And this book needs a bigger edition. I cannot wait until this book, which seems to be getting the acclaim that it needs now in these year-end lists, gets republished as a big absolute edition, because holy crap, do we need this big. I asked Jesse about buying a page from him. He said, nope, this one's too special for him. Good on you for keeping this, Jesse. But dang, can we get this bigger, please? And Wearing the Crown as my number 1 favorite book of 2025 is Craig Thompson's Ginseng Roots. Now, this should come as no surprise for anyone that has watched any of my stuff, knowing how important blankets is in my life. This is a book that I think of in the same way that I often equate in my mind blankets with Rabbit Run, John Updike's seminal introduction novel of the character of Rabbit. This feels a lot like Rabbit Redux, where we come back into a familiar situation, the same Craig that we knew from Blankets, now older and in a different place in his life. In the same way that we as a reader are older than we were, and probably in a much different place than when we first read Blankets. Craig talks about how in this particular book, what he wanted to write about was class divide in the U.S., corporate agriculture replacing the family farm, plant-based healing, even holistic healing for our global economy. And while those things are touched upon, what we really get is an examination of where Craig is in his life now. Those people around him that we first met in Blankets or were sometimes omitted, at the same time that he reconciles his current lot in life with an earlier part of his life working in the ginseng farms back in Wisconsin. Through that, we learn about the history of ginseng, not just in the US, but in China, and its broader global impact. While that may seem boring and minute, it reminds me a lot of Dirk Beckdorf's book, Trashed, where something so simple as the idea of trash is brought in so that we're both learning about the impact that this has, all while telling a narrative story. It's personal, it's informative, it's going to touch on anyone who finds themselves, I'm not going to say an existential crisis, but thinks of themselves maybe still at the time that they were in their life, the first time you read Blankets, that first young character who's going out and realizing that maybe you're not as young as you used to be anymore. Maybe you've got a few more gray hairs going on. You've got a few more responsibilities in life. And there are some things that you thought that you might do that you haven't done. And there's a whole bunch of things that you have done that you never imagined would go there. It's checking back in on old relationships. It's examining parts of your past that you'd forgotten about and reconciling with that part of you as a kid that loved deeply and joyously in a way that maybe you can't now. We already knew that Craig Thompson is a champion and a masterful graphic artist. He's a cartoonist that put the graphic novel format on the mainstream itinerary as something that is to be praised and upheld. And after about 20 years of other types of graphic novels, Craig has returned to the graphic memoir format, and we're all better off for it. If you are anyone who was touched ever by the book Blankets, who loves the graphic novel medium, who appreciates a perfect composition, lettering, any of the things like that, I cannot implore you heavily enough. Read Ginseng Roots. It may not hit you in exactly the same way as Blankets, but it's going to hit you somewhere. You're going to read this, you're going to feel, and you're going to see why it's my book of the year in 2025. And those 10 were the graphic novels of 2025 for me. As I said up top, this was the hardest year ever for me to come up with a list of just 10 graphic novels. So much so that I had to go out and do a separate honorable mention videos because there was no way I was going to end this year only talking about 10 books. I realized that this year, and really last year, have been leaner years on the channel that I haven't done as good a job of keeping up with comic content as really I would have liked to. And for anyone who stuck with me through that time, anyone who's been a longtime subscriber to the channel, I want to thank you for coming back and trusting me with your time to go out and do this. I don't have any excuses. If you are watching me for the first time and you've made it this long, thank you. Thank you so much for trusting me with your time too and coming through. For both categories of people, know I have been more active. I have found the love back in making videos, and I imagine that 2026 is going to be a much better year for me personally with making videos. I've got a lot of ideas that I'd like to do, and just so much comic love that I want to share with people, that I really anticipate making more videos that I think people are really going to like. But those are just me. Those are my things. If you have made it this far into the video, I have to ask, what did you think of comics in 2025? Have you read any of the ones that were on my list? Do you have feelings about them? Did you love them? Are you shocked that I'm talking about these books that maybe you think are trash and shouldn't be there? What do you think are the biggest omissions that I didn't cover here? Of course, we're all just reading what we read. Not everyone is going to read all the same books. So maybe there are some books I absolutely would have loved that you're looking at and you're saying, Bunk, what are you doing? This is such a you book. Please go out and read it. I want to hear all about those. Please let me down below in the comments. But hey, I've been Bunkmaster B, and I truly cannot tell you how amazing you all have been. I'll catch you next time. See ya.